Did God give his approval to polygamy in Deuteronomy 21? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Deuteronomy 21. We're going to be reading from verses 10 to 17. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy 21, beginning of verse 10. When you go out to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hand, and you take them captive, and see among the captives a beautiful woman, and desire her, and would take her for your wife, then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails. She shall put off the clothes of her captivity, remain in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a full month. After that you may go in to her, and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. And it shall be, if you have no delight in her, that you shall set her free, but you certainly shall not sell her for money. You shall not treat her brutally, because you have humbled her. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, and if the firstborn son is of her who is unloved, then it shall be, on the day he bequeaths his possessions to his son, that he must not bestow firstborn status on the son of the loved wife in preference to the son of the unloved, the true firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. In chapter 20, we dealt with how Israel was to conduct itself in war. Following the conquest of Canaan, when Israel went to war, they weren't to utterly destroy every person in the city or country with whom they fought. Instead, they were to kill all males, but spare females and children. Coming now to chapter 21 and verse 10, we find that when these foreign women were taken captive, it might be that one of the men want to marry a woman who was taken captive. Now we will find that there are exceptions in chapter 23, but on the whole, God said here that he would allow Israel to marry from among the women of the nations that were defeated. However, there would be some regulations that Israel had to follow. First of all, the men couldn't marry her for a month. This served a twofold purpose. First of all, it prevented a man from merely acting on the lust of a beautiful woman and then casting her away as though she was a prostitute. Marriage was always intended to be for life, even among the Hebrews, and so God here pumped the brakes on a hasty marriage by instituting this restriction. During that month, the woman was to be brought into the man's home. She was to shave her head, trim her nails, and put off the clothes of her captivity. That meant that she would no longer look like a captive, and this would be seen as a purification, the putting off of her former life and starting a new one in Israel. She was to be given time to mourn the house of her father and mother, meaning that she was to be given time to detach her affections from her natural ties in order to ready her mind for the new ones, her husband. This marriage would not have been planned and may not have even been done with her consent, though such isn't necessarily implied by the passage. So giving the woman time to prepare for this marriage is warranted. In all this, the man was not to abuse the woman nor take advantage of her. Now, if during this time his feelings toward her changed, and he decided to send her away, he was not to treat her as a slave, meaning sell her for money, nor was he to treat her brutally, for in taking her into his house and causing her to go through this purification, he humbled her. The man was to set her free and let her go her way in peace. Coming now to verse 15, we have a situation where a man has two wives. One of them is unloved, and the other is loved. When it comes to dividing his estate before death, if the firstborn son comes from the unloved wife, he is not to remove the birthright from him, the double portion that was due him as the firstborn son, and give it to the firstborn son of the wife that he loves. This would be unfair and unjust to the actual firstborn son, because through no fault of his own, his father simply didn't love that man's mother. When you think of a situation in the Old Testament where this happened, it was with the family of Jacob. Jacob, of course, had two wives and two concubines. Jacob's two wives were Leah and Rachel. Leah was unloved, while Rachel was loved by Jacob. Reuben was actually Jacob's firstborn son, born by Leah. while Joseph was actually Jacob's 11th son, though the first son born through Rachel. However, when it came time to bless his sons, Reuben did not receive firstborn status, while Joseph, through his two sons Ephraim and Manasseh, did. Did Jacob break this law? No, for two reasons. The first reason is the most obvious. This law didn't exist in the days of Jacob, so there was no law to break. Just because a law is found in Deuteronomy didn't mean that all the laws existed before Moses, for many of them didn't. The second reason is the circumstances surrounding Jacob's blessings. Reuben wasn't stripped of his birthright because he was born of Leah, but because Reuben went in and slept with one of Jacob's concubines. This was a disgrace, one that caused Reuben to surrender his birthright. That Joseph received the birthright through his two sons was most likely due to the fact that the other brothers sold Joseph into Egypt as a slave. Thus, they forfeited their right to the birthright as well. In any case, Jacob didn't break God's law here. The question remains, though, in this passage, does God approve of polygamy, but making a law surrounding a man with two wives? And the answer to that is no. How can I come to this conclusion? Well, for one, Jesus said in Matthew 19:4-6 that it was God's intention from the beginning that marriage was to be between one man and one woman, and that it was to last until death parts them. It was man on his own who decided to have more than one wife, and man would pay the price for it in the form of dysfunctional families. Now, why God tolerated it is God's business, not mine, but it probably is for the same reason that he tolerated divorce under the law of Moses, because of the hardness of man's heart. But if Israel was going to practice this, as other nations did, God was going to regulate it, even though he did not extend his approval to this practice. In the New Testament, though, since man has God's fully revealed word, he doesn't allow faithful men and women to practice polygamy and be right in his eyes. Marriage is to be practiced as it was originally designed, one man, one woman, for life, with the only exception to this being found in Matthew 19:9. Let's all seek to follow God's law in this regard and be pleasing in his sight. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy 21, verses 18-23, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.